Joe. Hey, welcome everybody to Business Monday. I'm Josh Fenton. We are in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. She is Megan Decker from G Media Studios. Let's see, happy Thanksgiving week. It is a little dark and gloomy in downtown Providence here on Wade Bossett Street. It is cold. I thought we were turning into the summer season, but it is not. No. It is not turning out that way, but I guess the rest of the country is getting hit with snowstorms and all sorts of awful things, so I guess we can count our lucky stars. It's a crazy week in commerce. It's a crazy week in business. We just had Black Friday, big numbers on Black Friday. Might have been the best Black Friday yet, certainly in the last 5 years, according to the early retail numbers. Cyber Monday is today, looking like it will definitely be a record number for Cyber Monday. Let's just go back to Friday. Big numbers online on Black Friday. Every indication up and away. Will we be closing retailers in the next recession? I mean, is online just growing so quickly and the experience is so much better? Is the experience better?
For me, for the past
You have twins.
Yeah.
You do have to disclose she has twins.
I've lived on Amazon. No, I think we're going to see some good numbers for Cyber Monday as well. I think it's just the way to go. It just makes things a lot easier. Did you do any Black Friday shopping?
I did not in a store. I really try to avoid stores and just don't really enjoy it. There are some things where the touch and feel kind of matters. You know, it's hard to buy a couch online unless you've shopped it in person ahead of time.
I bought a couch online.
And how did it work out?
Amazing.
Did it?
And I waited till New Year's Eve.
And did you get an unbelievable deal?
Yes.
And was
half the price.
And was it so good that if it didn't work out, it would have been okay?
Yes.
That's a pretty good deal, right? I think that's
because I have twins.
Right. So the shelf life of a couch in your household is?
We're probably going to get another one on Christmas Eve. Again.
A year? Is that what they're good for?
1 year, we're good to go.
Okay. They just don't make sippy cups like they used to, right?
No, they really don't. They really don't.
The numbers certainly indicate that almost any demographic of consumer is now completely comfortable making purchases online as well. The other trend you're starting to see that I think brick and mortar is trying to push is buy it online, pick it up at the store kind of thing.
Sure. To
be able to compete with an Amazon Prime and 48-hour delivery functionally. Is that an opportunity for them to save themselves, to get you into the store, or at least they get you into the parking lot and a chance that you're going to come in and pick up a couple other things while you're there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the draw is to, ideally make it the most easiest, seamless possible opportunity outside of online shopping. But once you're there, you're automatically thinking, what else might I need here? Right? I've already paid to park or found my spot. There's probably one or two things that I might as well run in and grab.
And on the case of Small Business Saturday, which didn't seem to get the same push.
It did get a lot of buzz, which I was disappointed to see. I would like to see more.
I think they need to move it. They're stuck between Black Friday and Cyber Monday. They need to be New Hampshire, like political primaries. They need to be a week earlier or something like that.
Like Small Business Sunday.
Something earlier before the rest of it. You work with ranges of different businesses. What's the sense you're getting from some of your clients? And I know some are B2B, but the ones who are trying to talk directly to consumers, what is it that they're seeing in the experience between, brick and mortar and online?
Well, I think it goes back again to the data and how do you use it and how do you leverage it to the best opportunity for your organization. And I think what I'm seeing a lot is we get the data, but we don't actually, we're not kind of flipping that back to a human experience and what they want, and really looking at a person as a human,
right.
Not just their data profile and segments of what makes them up as to who they are. So I think it's definitely still making sure that you're, especially the holiday season, pulling at the heartstrings of your consumers, but more so just making it something that they can relate to and still be interested in getting for Q1.
Speaking of data and non-human, let's jump over to Facebook.
Your favorite.
Facebook has had a rough couple of weeks. I thought they were going to have a rough third quarter, and their numbers were spectacular. But we're now in fourth quarter, and they're having as many bumps as just about anybody could have. Zuckerberg's run into some PR problems. The New York Times broke a story that one of their PR agencies was really trying to undermine journalists who were writing about the company. In some cases, allegedly false information about those journalists or those news organizations. There's word out of the European Union that I guess in the UK that they've got their hands on some very damaging data against Facebook about their strategy and maybe some activities that are not appropriate, whether they're illegal to be determined. But here's the flip side. Numbers are last 30 days, 2.1 billion users. 2.4 macro, but in the last 30 days, 2.1 users. Revenue continues to grow. We can all complain about it, but is it just such a monstrous machine that even if it unraveled 10%, what's that, 200 million people off, and they still at 2 billion? I mean, really not a factor.
It's not a factor. I mean, I think there's, obviously I was surprised that their numbers keep going up. I thought third quarter and fourth quarter were going to be difficult for them. But as you're still seeing the increase, I still think they'll have their day.
Yeah.
It might not be tomorrow, and it might not be in Q1, but I think...
Is that wishful thinking by the marketer in you that wants to go back to a more level playing field?
No, I just think at the end of the day, and you know what, like I've worked with Facebook, I've worked with Instagram, I've worked with all of these organizations, and I love the people there, and I just think that the interest from the consumer is going to go down.
And who leaves first? Probably the most famous personal technology writer was Walter Mossberg, who left the Wall Street Journal a couple of years ago and just retired from Recode, I think is where he left most recently. But he has been hammering Facebook on his tweets. Is it going to be the intelligentsia who never really bought in? If you're reading the New Republic, you're probably not on Facebook. Is it the intelligentsia who's going to leave? And for the rest of the country, who cares, right? I mean, there's such a disconnect between that 1% of the population who never got it, never liked it, didn't want to see cat videos anyways, and the rest of us.
I don't even think it's really a matter of of our target audiences. At the end of the day, I think it's just going to be a generational thing. It's us and our grandparents are on Facebook.
Okay, but if you go to Instagram, they're owned by Facebook, right? Is there any sign?
Working on my mom coming over with me
to Instagram?
Yeah, she's doing good.
I have to say, a semi-famous artist that I know, fairly famous, has a national reputation. A couple of months ago, announced that he was leaving Facebook. And that he was going to Instagram. A number of people pointed out that that's another Facebook company, but he was done with it. He didn't care. He couldn't stand the political, and he's back on Facebook. Like, is it crack cocaine? Is it that you have to be a part of it, or you're missing something of what's going on in your community, your family, the world? Or is it just a real business necessity that if you're trying to get attention to your good, your service, your viewpoint, whatever it might be, that it's a necessary evil, whether you like it or not?
It's a necessary evil.
You heard it here first. We broke her down. You did. We didn't even use the waterboarding technique.
You weren't taping that, right?
At the end of this Christmas season, what are the big ahas going to be? What are people going to walk away in business and say, wow, I didn't realize X? That's question one. And the second question is, I should have Y. What are those?
Consumer standpoint?
Now, from a business standpoint, what's going to be the big surprise?
Interesting. From a marketing perspective,
yeah.
I would say that you're going to see the big aha of 2018.
Yeah. Holiday
Why
season.
didn't I do anything with my consumer data?
Yeah.
Why didn't I leverage that to the best of my ability?
Is there just a lot of smart data that people are just leaving in the proverbial pile in the corner? Like, I collected it all.
Absolutely.
I used to get the Wall Street Journal in paper version about 10 years ago, probably for 2 or 3 years. It would come in, I'd pick it up at my office, and I'd put it in a pile over there, and probably 1 out of 10 of them did I actually read the Wall Street Journal. Think how much smarter I'd be. Is it that everybody's collecting data? Listen, you're in business today, you're getting tons of insights from your Facebook. If you have an email strategy, there's tons of data from your email strategy. Google Analytics gives you tons of analysis. If you're just doing those basics, you have a lot of data. How many folks are actually looking at it?
13%.
13%? Is that a wild guess, or is that a statistically?
No, that's a wild guess. But that's what I would say. I think everybody knows and understands that we have to have all this profile and data information about our consumer. We need to know all of this stuff, but then how it's actually used and leveraged. Is
there so much data, and that we've got a generation of people who are leading companies, who are heads of marketing, who aren't data analysts, right? They didn't get trained in that. They got trained in, if you're head of marketing, you got trained in working with your sales strategy, branding, maybe promotion, maybe some cool interactive stuff early on. But you didn't learn how to do high degrees of statistical analysis, A/B test everything, build all that organizational structure in. And even the super smart companies aren't always A/B testing headlines every day as what the offer is for the 4 o'clock CVS promotion.
Yeah, no, I mean, even right now, we're doing tons of research and analysis, moreover than even some of the marketing initiatives that we're doing.
Yeah.
It's been just
Data.
Focus groups, the whole 9 yards,
Yeah.
just to really understand the emotional perspective of how people feel about the brands.
Okay, so data 1 is going to be on the second part, I should have is going to be I wish I had spent more in marketing. I wish I had spent more on Facebook. Are they going to say, I wish I had cut costs? What's going to be the takeaway? Because this is going to be for almost everybody, it's going to be a successful holiday season. Yeah. Sometimes nobody learns anything because, we were up 3%. Yeah. We must be smart. But you could have been up 15%. Might have been able to be up 20%.
I think it'll be, I wish I optimized more of the data to really understand the meaning of it and building out a customer journey map. And if I didn't do it in 2018, it's my big initiative for this year.
Great.
In Q1.
Last question for you. Are there going to be any big failures? Announcement came today that General Motors is laying off 15% of its salaried workers. We watch bikes and scooters and Lyft and Ubers go flying by here. Is the golden age of automobile in the United States over?
No.
No.
People still want fancy cars.
They still want fancy, was that all? But 15% GM in a pretty robust economy. You don't usually see major automakers cutting 15% at a time where there's functionally no unemployment.
That is true.
So, prediction? You still want their fancy cars in America?
I think we'll still see the decline, but I think
it's not falling off the table.
It's not totally falling off the table.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's.
Do you have to get a new car every year too because of the twins?
3 cars now.
You have 3 cars?
And only 2 of us drive.
And only 2 of the 4 of you drive.
And we inherit cars, I feel like, in our household.
Did you go with a convertible 2-seater to try and get out?
Yeah, like a Miata.
I want a Miata. Honey, you take the kids.
See, that's the only reason I say that, because I can't Uber with my children.
Megan Decker, G Media. We'll see her back in about a month. We'll have some Christmas holiday data next time you're on. Sure. And thanks so much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the holidays. Survive the twins. And what is the famous hashtag?
Hashtag the twins are winning.
And they always are. Love the pictures of the holiday pictures. Oh my God.
We'll have wine next session.
We'll be right back in about 30 seconds with Gary Sass, the money man, head of the Hassenfeld Institute at Bryant University. We'll be right back. We are back at the 4 o'clock hour, the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center here on Business Monday. I'm Josh Fenton. He is cha-ching, Gary Sass, the money man, knower of everything fiscal in Rhode Island and in the United States. We've not tested his global knowledge recently, but let's go. Let's go to Detroit. I think the big three automakers are still in Detroit. Numbers coming out of Detroit say that GM's going to lay off 15% of its salaried workers in the United States and in Canada. It sticks out to me, not that big layoffs at major corporations are shocking anymore, but it does seem a little unusual in a period of time with low unemployment when auto consumption is usually at its height. Is this cleaning up dead wood, or is this an indication? I asked Megan Decker, she did not agree, but I inferred that this is a number that may be shifting transportation tastes to Ubers, Lyfts, bird scooters, and all the rest might have a little implication on the demand for U.S. autos.
Well, I think it's the kind of cars that are being produced. Some of the plants, they're closing 5 plants, that's how they're laying off 15,000 people.
Yeah.
One of the plants they closed were producing a Chevy Cruze, which is not a very popular car. So I would start by asking the question is, what part of the layoffs resulting from poor engineering, poor design, poor planning, poor marketing? And I think that's a big part of it. I think the second, which we've known for a long time, when you talk about the auto industry, whether you're a German company or a Japanese company, you're building your cars in America.
Yeah.
So BMW is building cars in America, Mercedes is building cars in Alabama. The Japanese manufacturers have been building cars in Tennessee and Kentucky.
Ohio,
for a long time.
yeah.
When I lived in Tennessee, we lived right next to something that was called the Smyrna Air Base, a big Air Force base. The government gave it over to the state as surplus property, and 2 months later it was sold to, at that time it was called Datsun, but it was sold to Nissan.
Right.
And now I don't know how many jobs they have out there, but it's a major manufacturing facility. So if you can't compete with the right designs, if your cars are not popular, internationally you're going to have your lunch eaten. But internationally doesn't mean that the cars are just produced in Germany or in Sweden or in Japan. Those cars are produced here. And so General Motors, being part of that global economy, has to look strategically where they locate their plants.
So you're voting no on an indication of overall demand for autos, or are we hitting a different behavioral?
I don't know. I think people are driving cars longer.
Yeah.
I don't have any data to back that up.
No, that is true. Absolutely. They're better built.
They're better built. So that impacts on it. And so there are a lot of behavioral changes. I think the demand for cars in the urban areas is less. It's less with the new generation of kids that want to be hip and live in the middle of cities. They have less need, for a car. They could do the Uber or Lyft or Hertz or whatever over the weekends. So there are behavioral shifts, but I think the fundamental demand for family cars, the fundamental fact that we are largely a suburban country, is going to have a demand for automobiles, but the demand is going to be dampened by the factors that I just mentioned.
Let's shift to Rhode Island and the issue of gambling as a revenue stream. When you were director of administration at a revenue, it was the golden goose. It was growing.
Well, my experience wasn't so golden, because one of the first things Governor Carcieri had me do was to work with the original owners of Twin River, and go through I managed a very difficult bankruptcy process.
Right.
So it was laying some eggs for the state, but it wasn't laying a lot of eggs for the investors. And because of the bankruptcy, the balance sheet got cleaned up. The new people came in who've been good operators. And it's been laying some golden eggs. But there's another example where it's not so golden. The receipts from traditional lottery games.
All down. Almost all down.
All down.
And even the new games aren't hitting the numbers that I think they anticipated. They're flat, marginally up. They've had obviously a lot of problems getting the sports betting up. Missed, according to experts in Las Vegas, they missed 75% of the revenue opportunity because they missed almost all of college football, beginning of basketball, World Series, beginning of hockey, most of the NFL season, most of the early betting on college basketball. So Las Vegas, professor out there at University of Las Vegas, Nevada says it's probably 75%, that 2 month, approximately 2 month delay. Do we really need to think about our dependency on that revenue stream? Because there's not a lot of new games to be had other than rollerball, I guess.
No, the market, there was a time there where everyone thought they would just open up a casino and it would, like you say, produce the golden goose. There are more facilities now, more venues
right.
For gambling. But I think if you look at the state budget and say we're generating roughly $300 million from gambling, it won't grow as quickly as it's been growing. It may decline slightly, but it's not going to necessarily fall off the cliff. So it's there. It'll produce about 10-11% of revenue, but it's not going to be 15 or 20%.
Because of that, Massachusetts opened their first 2 marijuana retail operations last week. I think it was Monday or Tuesday. They did at 2 very rural locations. They did $400,000 in sales, $78,000 in tax revenue from those 2 stores alone in one day. Now, obviously, it was first day, but the reports off of Saturday after the holiday was equally significant. They're going to open a ton more of retail locations, I'm sure. Whether legal or not, some of them are Rhode Islanders. They sell to out-of-staters. Is that the next place that lawmakers will be forced to look at for new revenue opportunities, both based on public demand? A majority of Rhode Islanders would like to see legalization, coupled with the thirst for a new revenue structure.
Oh, the pressure will be on because the state's budget is still not in great shape. There's still deficits. Yes, I think there will be some pressure to do it. I think the governor's taken the right wait and see attitude. I think when you talk about revenue and budgets reflect values, there is a debate on both sides. Whether selling recreational marijuana is a necessity or whether it's being driven by just the sake for more money to support more spending. Because every time we increase the revenue to support more spending, the spending outgrows the revenues. It outpaces the revenues. Our problem is that not that we haven't done well with revenue. It's that we haven't done well controlling spending. So don't look at it as a cure-all. Look at it as a one-time fix. And then what are the trade-offs for this one-time fix? Is it the practical reality that Rhode Island isn't going to go to Massachusetts and buy pot, and so they'll stay here and pay taxes, or are there other costs associated with it, or are there values that we have as a state that suggests that it may not be good to be a state that legalizes recreational sale of marijuana?
If you play out the math a little bit and expand what the potential marketplace is, it could be a revenue source in the Commonwealth of $1 million a day in new tax revenue. Now, if you extrapolate that to Rhode Island and say, okay, it's going to be a sixth of it, we're talking about $50 million in new tax revenue or upwards.
Well, put that in perspective. Let's say we're talking about $20 million in new tax revenue. I just pulled this number out of the air. I have no idea what the estimates are. Our general revenue is about $3.9 billion. So at that point, it's a half of 1%. And if that number's right, even if it was 1%, even if we generated 30 or 35 million or 40 million, I don't look askew at $40 million, but it's 1% of budget.
Yeah.
And so what are the costs involved for generating additional 1%? And what's going to be the elasticity of that 1%? Because we'll spend it 4 or 5 times before we're finished with it.
So you're a nay on the legalization of marijuana.
Well, not for fiscal reasons. If you ask me, something I understand about fiscal policy, I'm kind of agnostic on it right now, but personally, I have values that suggest that legalizing marijuana or legalizing any substance and having more widespread use of a substance that are habit forming is not a good idea. Just I don't believe, I think it's a healthy environment. I believe something that is not backed by science at all. It's just a belief that it's an introductory, stimulus to other kinds of drug use. I'm concerned that marijuana can find its way into chocolate chip cookies that kids buy at the 7-Eleven.
Happens all the time.
And so, because of those reasons, I think you have to say, okay, there are economic benefits. I don't think anybody would argue. We might argue on the degree of that economic benefit, but there are also social costs, and there are also costs about value and what your sense of community is. And when I look at all those issues and not look at it fiscally, it's just from a government finance perspective, I have prejudices, I have biases. And my bias is against illegal, not illegal anymore, but making substances more available.
Rhode Island's budget is, despite low unemployment and a fairly decent economy, we're looking at deficits in this fiscal year and in next fiscal year. They're not off the charts. They're not, 10% of budget. We've talked about this a number of times. It is a nuisance. It is an aggravation. It doesn't allow for a lot of creativity and new programming if you're constantly, as you know, sending down to the departments and saying, give me all the departments, please get us a 10% cut to each of your budgets type of thing. Is there any chance of ever breaking the cycle of deficit structure issues related to?
All states have deficit structures. Unless you have
Do they have it every single year, whether it's good times or bad?
Very few budgets are going to come in at zero. So in good times, you may have a amount of surplus. In bad times.
So shouldn't we be on the surplus side?
Well, the problem we have is our mix, and the biggest.
And also with a 4-year, one of the arguments for having 4-year terms for governor was that it would allow governors to plan out and be better fiscal managers because they didn't have to be so responsive to.
But we didn't go to 4-year terms of the legislature. So enough said about that. I think the problem with the deficit this year, we have a deficit. We continue to have a deficit. Is to ask, the first question is why, and we know the deficit is being caused by overspending. Where? Well, because of the amount we spend on Medicaid, on social services, the dependence of the population on those kinds of services, that's running good money away. And so the biggest problem of the deficits is you keep on funding what you're doing because that's their entitlements, you're committed to do it, and you never have enough money to make investments at scale. We make investments, but not always at scale. And so the issue of the deficit, when you look long term about what this state's going to look like and what we need to be investing in, is the opportunity cost. Instead of putting more money into the University of Rhode Island, instead of putting more money into certain educational programs, whether it's bilingual or building a real career tech school, no one or doing what the governor says she's doing with computers in every school, but we'll have to go to every school to find them. You're not doing what you know you need to do to make the investments to make this place more productive, and the reason you're not doing it is you're always dealing around with this deficit, caused by overspending on programs where you have very little control. We certainly don't have the policy incentives to make changes and manage those programs more effectively.
Will we just kick the can again this year?
I don't, unless there's a second coming. I imagine that's possible.
Is it frustrating? Listen, nobody wants a deficit. Nobody wants a deficit in good times. Nobody wants a deficit when you functionally have full employment. Does it worry you? Should it worry the governor? Should it worry lawmakers that when the next recession comes and some revenues begin to dip, that it's going to cause some real pain and suffering, do some key programs.
Big time. There's the old fable that smart squirrel put away the nuts during summer, and the dumb squirrel just ate all the nuts, and he froze his ass off in the winter. Well, we've had some good times, and we've invested a hell of a lot of money in real estate and certain economic development. And the question is, have we done anything to change Rhode Island as being a first in, last out state? And when I look at the projections that are made by the state, made for the state by IHS Markit as part of the Revenue Estimating Conference, they project that over the next 5-year period, or the period of 2018 through 2023, Rhode Island will be 43rd in employment growth, 46th in personal income growth. We know that if you held the labor force steady, just theoretically held the labor force steady, our unemployment rate wouldn't be 3.8 or 3.9%, it would be 6.1%. And so while we have invested a lot, and while we've done some good things to make the state more competitive, particularly in the area of business taxes, we still have not done things at scale to be game changers, to not become the first in and the first out state. So when you put hundreds of millions of dollars and emphasize real estate as opposed to education, or as opposed to other kinds of structural reforms, you have the high, you feel good. Construction guys are working. Construction is not up that much, but it's up some. And you see the 1 or 2 cranes in the sky, building apartments no one could afford to live in, or hotels. We're not sure what the occupancy rates are going to be. But as soon as that stops and the recession, happens, you don't maximize the gains you could have made in changing the structure. And there are a couple of really basic economic lessons, and this you have to give credit to some economists at Harvard. It's not original thinking. When you look at what states need to do and how they need to compete, you find out that the states compete to provide the most productive environment. And what that means is an environment where business can make the most productive use of its people, of its capital, of the state's natural resources.
Right.
And so if you become more productive, you're more competitive. That's the basic definition. Innovation drives competitiveness. Now, we know what you have to do to become more competitive, and we do some of it, but not enough of it. You have to get rid of a lot of regulations and permitting. You've got to do things that necessarily drive up the cost of doing business in the state. You need to invest like hell in research institutions and public and higher education, both public and private. You need to be relentless about school reform. We don't even have a strategy to reform our schools. You need to promote clusters.
Yeah.
And we recognize all those things. So you can go through the budget, and I can find you 50,000 here, or 100,000 there, or maybe $1 million, somewhere else to do some of those things. But that doesn't make a change. They need to be at scale. And so the question, the concern I have about how Commerce Rhode Island has made investments is we put a lot in real estate. And in about 5 years, we're going to wake up, and I'm not going to pretend to answer the question. We're going to find out, whether we over-invested in real estate to the underinvestment in things that would make us a more productive state.
Yeah.
Building another building is a good thing. Real estate is part of the equation, but the real estate per se doesn't make you more productive. And so there may be a difference between a Wexford project, or Wexford is originally envisioned, and building 5 hotels with publicly subsidized hotels. That's what they used to do in communist Russia. They would publicly subsidize their hotels over there too. So
is that a slightly damning statement on our economic development strategy?
It's a historical
reference. Yeah.
But that's the important question, because you need an agenda. The agenda, I think, others may disagree, needs to be focused on how we make the state the most productive it can be, because the most competitive states are the most productive states, and we recognize that.
So let me ask a couple questions. So whether it's Governor Raimondo or her predecessor or predecessors, have been historically so many holes, right? Old infrastructure, 50th ranked in roads and bridges, underperforming elementary and secondary schools, per dollar invested, arguably amongst the worst, low ranking in many national analyses. A demand for hotels. One of the highest occupancy rates over the last few years, potential for greater growth within the tourism industry, hampered by the lack of hotels. Is it that there's so many problems that you just can't touch them all? You just can't address them all?
It's a question of choices and priorities. Now, you cannot pay attention to the problems, but I'll ask you a very simple question. If you believe, which I do and others may not, that the key to becoming a more productive state are people, are a labor force, then you invest more in schools, you invest more in higher education, you invest more in public school, performance, public school quality. You say no to some of the special interest adults who may be holding you back from doing that. You take on that fight, and you believe that that's the best investment that has the highest marginal utility of making, that investment. That doesn't say you ignore some of the other things. You can't ignore those kinds of things, but it's a question of choices and allocation. And I get concerned that when you look through the economic development plan, I could find you a program du jour, and they sound good, probably useful, most cases not at scale. And so you have to have the courage of your convictions to say the most important things we need to do are X. Now, you and I can sit here and we can disagree. You can say the most important thing is Y, and we should be using 50% of our resources for Y. I could say X, and we can have that debate, but make the decision and then move forward. I haven't seen that in our economic development program. I joke about the real estate, but I look at the Wavemaker program. That's a good program. Some of the tax incentives are helpful. Some I think are less helpful. But the jobs tax credit is work well.
Last question for you. We see a number of potentially coolings. The stock market's been volatile. Real estate prices in Rhode Island seem to have stabilized. They've certainly slowed in their growth in many ways. In hot markets like the East Side and some others, you're seeing a flattening out. They were sort of in hypergrowth. Are we cooling as an economy, and does that necessarily mean, because we are cooling, mean that we're headed towards a recession, or is it just a cooling off period and we could hit another period of growth?
Well, I think the economy, not just our economy, but the international economy is cooling. Look at what's happening in Europe right now. There's clearly a slowdown,
if not a recession.
And so if Europe sneezes, we get a cold. So there are factors beyond our control. But the important point that you're making, and I don't know the answer to the question, if the economists that say we're a first in, last out state are right, then and the economy cools, we get hit pretty hard. And it takes us longer to get out. And my point, if you dismiss everything else I've said, is during good times, what have we done to change the belief of many economists? I'm not saying I agree with it, but many economists that we're a first in, last out state that when the economic cycle changes, and that would be the pity of the whole thing is that we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars. We've improved infrastructure. We've improved our tax competitiveness. But at the end of the day, we don't have any more control over our destiny than before this started. And that's how this administration is going to be judged 4 or 5 years from now.
Gary Sass, the money man, I know it's been a difficult few days after a very emotionally charged rivalry football game down
after the first half when you know what's happening.
Florida State. It was not pretty, but the season's over.
God is great.
God is great.
Well, now it's time to get ready for the revenge tour. And I think the revenge tour won't start next year, but it'll start in 2020.
Can anyone beat Alabama?
Yeah, I think somebody can beat Alabama. I think Clemson has a shot. I'm looking for really a great SEC championship game. Georgia
Georgia.
has a good offensive line. They have.
They always have great running backs, that's for sure.
They have good running backs. They got two decent quarterbacks. They got a defensive-minded coach, Kirby Smart, who came from Alabama.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that'll be a competitive game.
Thank you so much. We're going to be right back in about 30 seconds with Saul Kaplan here at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Mr. Innovation, Gary Sass, the Money Man, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. It is Business Monday. I'm Josh Fenton. Thanks to Gary Sass, the Money Man, for being on a little earlier. Saul Kaplan, Business Innovation Factory, in the house. Lots of innovation going on everywhere. Right now at fulfillment facilities around the country, little baskets are flying around on automated systems collecting stuff. Lots of stuff, plastic stuff, electronic stuff that is going to be shipped via Amazon Prime and will be at all of our houses about this time on Wednesday.
Well, it's been incredible for all forms of retail this week. My goodness, from Thanksgiving through here, we're still part of Cyber Monday today, right? So we're not done yet.
No, and most of the
plenty of time to
offers,
shop.
yeah, and most of the offers carry on an extra day or two, so they can squeeze every last cent out of each of us. The numbers off Friday on online spending off the charts by every indication. Continuing to see this massive behavioral change in which I'm not getting in a car, I'm not going out at 3 in the morning. I am going to sit in my lounge chair watching Netflix and spending money.
Yeah, I think there's, it's still a little early to see the total numbers. The numbers I saw, over from Thursday through to estimates of what's happening today, some $20 billion online.
Online.
And the in-store sales didn't decline
Right.
this year. Right?
Right.
So overall, the number's up, but there's no, there's no denying the trend here, which is, we're using online tools. I think the interesting thing is that a lot of it's blended.
Yeah.
A lot of people combine.
Buy it online, pick it up at the store.
Picking it up in the store, checking things out in the store, using online. So it's a good sign. I think a lot of these retailers are getting more facile at learning how to use the technology to change the shopping experience. But still, I'm sure when the numbers are all said and done, Amazon will have taken a very significant
just
share
brutal.
of what's happening.
Is it also, this continued separation, right? If you're a wonderful boutique store in some affluent community and you've got a following, you don't need to be online. But if you're going to be online, you better have tools. You better be investing in technology. Yeah. And as we all know, the keeping up with the Joneses is not an inexpensive requirement. So if you're going to build robust online stores and a system to deliver, free shipping, get it there in 48 hours, et cetera, you've got to have some capital, you've got to have some technology bandwidth to be able to do it. So the Bennies of the world, not just in Rhode Island, they're cooked.
Dinosaurs. I think you've got to do this regardless. I mean,
Right.
you're going to, even if you're going into a physical store, they can't afford the inventory to have all the sizes, all the colors. You're going to go into the store, and more often than not, you're going to find that what you really want is at some other location or
Right.
in the warehouse, and there are going to be all kinds of options for how they get that to you. So it changes what the physical store is for. It changes their whole business model. And if you're not doing this, I just don't know how you survive.
Nordstrom's, who announced they're leaving Providence Place
Right.
Mall at the end of the year in January, I'm not sure what the exact date is, announced about a year ago that they were going to build these mini stores, which was functionally showrooms that you go in. Target's recrafting their big box structure to have alternatives to be able to go into urban areas and have kind of a mini Target within that environment where they can pay a lower rent, not have the same kind of infrastructure costs. Just constant innovation, trial, error, lock them down, close them up, build them, scale them, crash and burn them.
I talk about my technical term, for this is try more stuff.
Yeah.
But
is that a technical term?
It's a technical
and is that
expression.
Is that trademark?
Like we have to get more comfortable trying more stuff. We have to experiment all the time. But here's my advice: like don't wait.
Yeah.
Until you got a quarter left. To stay in business and say all of a sudden now we gotta.
Now we're going digital. We're going digital big,
You've
right?
got to do this when you're at your strongest point. You've got to constantly look for new ways to change the customer experience. And we're seeing that in all forms of retail now. No, of course we're at the top of an economy, which worries me about what comes after that. When we hit the next downturn.
Yeah.
But right now, this season, pretty incredible for retailers of all kinds. What worries me is the concentration of how much of their annual operating income did they have to produce, in the last 2 months of the year.
Right.
And then how do you afford all those fixed costs, and what happens to the employment base, the rest of the year.
Right.
If everyone,
is everybody going to become a temporary worker overseeing robots in a warehouse of a million square feet?
Different roles, different jobs,
right.
different skills, different models. Try more stuff. Reinvent yourself, the organization, your community. And so it's a constant drumbeat. It's a good time to be an innovation junkie, isn't it?
Speaking of try more stuff, Elon Musk is on his way to Mars. Is he personally in that spacecraft?
I laughed out loud when I read that today. Did you see what he said? He said there's a 70% chance that I'm gonna not just go to Mars. I'm gonna live. I'll probably die there. So what he said. He put a number on it. 70% chance. Now.
Okay, do the math on how long it takes to get there. I'm not buying it.
Landing a probe. NASA's landing a Mars probe,
Right.
and I'm sure he timed that that comment for this. Right, this is a probe that they put on Mars that has the capability of doing all kinds of seismic analysis and can drill down, I think, 16 feet into it's the first time we've been able to do that. We can actually drill with a remote probe 16 feet in. They finally figured out the technology to do that. And on the day they do it, Elon Musk says, there's a 70% chance that I'm going to live there. I don't even know if it's believable that he'll actually be able to get there, never mind to live there. It's like unbelievable. But it's Elon Musk.
So is his rule of thumb that whenever things have finally settled down and he's not in complete chaos, he's got to light a match to...
He's going to provoke. No, in the same week, he was interviewed. And we learned, we all knew this because we saw the great lengths they went to ship these Model 3s, these Teslas. And so today I saw an interview where he came out and he actually said, we were literally within, he said, single-digit weeks, not hundreds, less than 10 weeks of going out of business.
Yeah.
Right. And so now you understand why they were putting up tents,
But almost every great success story. I have a friend, family in the auto industry, and I won't name him because I didn't ask him, but he'll tell the story of a very successful, long-standing, family-owned mega dealer in Rhode Island. They were within literally days of not only going out of business during the credit union crisis, but also their houses going. I mean, it wasn't just, oh, we're going to lose the business and go somewhere else. It's the whole kit and caboodle. There's the famous, of course, story of FedEx, which literally there was a huge shift in fuel prices right when he had launched the company, and he had to literally borrow, hustle, steal $25,000 overnight, or the company was gone.
Yeah.
So
a little bit of this, I think, are these. It doesn't help us because we kind of prop up these iconic entrepreneurs, right? And their stories. Now I almost went out of business last Wednesday.
Right.
Now
I'm worth another billion. Right.
I rule the planet.
Right.
Kinds of stories. And what it does, the problem with those kinds of narratives, which I wonder how much of it's revisionist or not. But the problem is, it says to us mere mortals, that we can't really be successful as entrepreneurs, right?
Right.
You have to have this existential crisis.
Well, but there are two genres. Are there the Warren Buffetts and the Bill Gates and the Jeff Bezos who have a plan and they follow it and it's very planned? Or is it the wild, wild west type, or just different industries, right? Certain industries. Listen, you hit software, you're making money. You have a great software product, and it scales, and it hits the market, right? It's a lot of reoccurring revenue comes off of software. You're manufacturing, you're trying to create a major auto company. That, how's John DeLorean doing with that model, right?
I think it goes back to the try more stuff. I think they never get it right. Initially, they have to iterate towards it. There's multiple versions of it. You bring me any successful entrepreneur and you ask them about how many times did you get it right? Or another way to ask the question, did your original business plan, kind of pan out the way you thought it was going to pan out? I mean, any entrepreneur will tell you, no way, right? It took me 4 or 5 tries. I had to pivot. I had to change.
Right.
I might have ended up in a different business than what I thought I was going to be in when I started, right? But they were relentless, right? And they kept pivoting and trying and knowing when to walk away from something or to get rid of something that wasn't going to pan out. I think those are the characteristics of entrepreneurship that we can all emulate, right? And so we got to be a little careful of these iconic, kind of looking at these icons. But it is true that you have to try, experiment, be ready to change, or else you're going to be flat-footed and someone's going to come around and disrupt you. It's true.
I've talked to last 2 guests. I'll throw it out with you. GM laying off 15,000.
Yeah.
Gary Sass and Megan Decker both said, 15,000. It's the kind of cars.
What's 15,000?
What's 15,000 full-time employees? I'm starting to wonder, just watching some of the numbers coming out of the auto industry, Lyft, Uber, scooters, and also the danger zone of, in our generation, when you were a 16-year-old boy, arguably the most important thing in the entire world was your car. The idea of getting a car, having a cool car, you had car posters. There's not a millennial in the United States that appears to care about their car, right? Is this a warning sign that maybe Tesla will be the new cool car, but if you're a GM, a Ford, Chrysler, Fiat, whatever the corporate structure is this week, I've got to really be worried, because once these boomers are done buying their last car, I'm in big trouble.
Well, it's about transportation. It's about getting from A to B, and for a lot of years,
but didn't used to
we thought
be.
It was only about cars.
But also it wasn't just about getting from point A to B. It was how we got there and what it looked like driving into our neighborhood and what our neighbors thought about us because of the car we owned, and our in-laws thought I was, good because I had a cool car. I was providing well for my family.
True. Part of it was cultural.
Were you Richie Riches over on the east side of Providence?
Yeah, I drive a Honda Civic, please. No Tesla. Although I did Google at a cousin's Tesla. That was at Thanksgiving on Thursday. Well, the way they announced it, I'm not sure I buy all of this.
Yeah.
But the way they announced it is, we've got to shift resources to electric vehicles and to autonomous vehicles,
Yeah.
which is where the technology is bringing us. And they don't want to get beat by the tech companies who think they're going to take over and disrupt the entire auto
With
industry.
driverless cars.
Right, and we'll see whether that pans out or not. But listen, I don't make light of 15,000 jobs, and it's not just the manufacturing jobs.
Oh, no.
There were 9,000 of them that I think were white-collar jobs. And
Well, but
locations-
the implications to employment, for every direct job in an auto manufacturer, it's 10 jobs in the suppliers and in the network of who's providing
that's right.
parts, et cetera, et cetera. Has
Absolutely.
huge implications up and down the food chain.
Locations, right? Because this isn't just jobs in general.
Right.
These are communities these are the major employers. So these plants that they're closing
Right.
are in Michigan and Ohio and
Right.
one in Ontario
Right.
and Canada. You already see the political backlash that affects communities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? In every one of those things, when a plant closes, when they run out the production of a car that's coming offline, and then they replace it with some other product where that line isn't capable, of making that vehicle, right? Then people's jobs are affected. Where do you go? And now this affects our whole political dialogue, right? Because these are important Midwest states that,
Yep.
that have a big role to play.
Decide
Certainly
the
in
last
election
yep.
they did, and it looks like they will again in the next election.
When are we going to see driverless cars? When are we going to be standing in this window and
Yep.
down the road goes, there goes one. Just
Well-
like we stand here and watch
Yep.
bird scooters. The idea of bird scooters.
I think you're going to start seeing them with kind of specialty uses before they're general there.
Yep.
Certain fleets, right, that go certain predictable path. You'll start to see them come into that space.
Yep.
So yeah, you're going to start seeing.
Will it
them.
be Uber and Lyft?
Right.
Will those be the first fleets?
Could be, but it could be
Bob's
could be
Taxi
some municipal
Company.
fleet. It could be some, kind of public sector vehicles or buses, like what?
Blood
buses
center
that
or
look more like
delivering.
trams. They make it feel more comfortable, so that we can get used to the idea. But there's no question that we're going to see these vehicles. It's going to affect everything, and the numbers are going to bear out that in the end, it's going to end up being safer than human error in driving cars. But everything needs to change in order for that to happen, and it won't happen overnight, but it is going to.
What's the time?
Technology's
What's the
gonna-
time frame?
I think you'll see them over the next 3 to 5 years, but you're going to
36
see them
months.
in narrow kind of use cases, so we'll bump into it. I don't think they'll be in general use, but I think you could, over a 10 to 15 year time frame, start to see it shift to get to some kind of tipping point. You already started to see it, even the new Teslas. For a while they were coming with an option or a package, where you could put in the technology, or have a placeholder for the technology when it becomes available. Probably a little too early, and they backed off of it, given their most recent distribution.
Like let's just build a.
But they didn't give up on the idea, I can assure you, because in the end, this is electronics, this is software, and this is learning and artificial intelligence so that the software knows, with sensors on the car and in the community, every situation that's feasible, so they can start learning from each other, and it'll just become safer and safer and safer. And you know what? Someday we'll look back and say, I can't believe we ever had to sit in that front seat.
Yeah, right.
With our attention paid to the road. But right now it seems like it's a little far out there, but I don't think so. I think it's going to happen a lot faster than
Out of this year, as we start to preview kind of the end of the year, but staying on this holiday theme of what's going to be the aha? Is it going to be another like last year of, oh my God, Amazon is crushing? I can't remember what the exact number was. 89% of all online sales were owned by Amazon. The next largest was, Walmart at 4% or something like that. Are we going to see that continued? And despite having an okay year, the Macy's and the Targets and the Kohl's just fall further and further behind. Is that going to be the big aha?
Yeah, you're going to see a lot more separation between the winners and the losers. You're going to see more folks go out of business, and you're going to see really the devastation in a lot of communities as we head into the next down cycle, right? Because right now we're in an up cycle, consumer.
Which covers over flaws fairly well.
It makes it look like things are better than they are, and we haven't really built the resiliency, meaning for me, mostly the skills of people to reinvent themselves to be able to participate in a 21st century economy. I think we have to reimagine our workforce development systems and how they link in an integral way to our education systems so that people are getting out ahead, which will make the local economy more resilient. I'm really worried about the next downturn because like every single upturn, we never seem to make the structural investments and changes, including our own skills.
You're right.
And so it really hurts us during the downturn.
Will we see anyone ever emerging that can compete with an Amazon?
No.
Walmart's obviously making a number of strategic acquisitions and a huge investment, but they're not going to get certain types of consumers. They're not going to get middle class and affluent purchasers. Probably tough to get a lot of B2B that Amazon now gets. I mean, literally everything we buy is on Amazon. We had to buy something today. It was probably $1,000 purchase. It was similar price structure between Amazon and another provider. And you know what? We're going with Amazon because we know it's going to be here by 4 o'clock on Wednesday.
Yeah. Let's just say the post
absolutely.
office and the UPS truck
Yeah.
swung by and swung through the hood.
Right. Absolutely.
This past week.
Will anybody, because what's the barrier to entry? I mean, certainly the warehousing is, and the technology is, and the branding is. There's a lot of different types of obstacles, but it's also all out there, right?
Well, first of all, to say that they're going to take over the whole world and be the only player out there, right?
They're on a path to it right now, and there's not a lot of regulatory structures who are standing up to the Facebooks, the Googles, and the Amazons, right?
Let me take each part of that. One, I think it puts the pressure on competitors to do something that's truly differentiated, right? And so now you start to look at personalization and products and production of products on site, to personal specs as opposed to shipping them the traditional way, right? Because Amazon will run out the value on global supply chains, and being able to ship physical goods, that are purchased online. And then the next wave is going to become the personalization, right? When you have a need, how do I create products that are to your personal spec, right? And that are going to require more of the materials stored here. It's like 3D printers creating products in your
Well,
own
let's go
home.
back. 10 years ago, we thought the danger was they need to be broken up. Walmart was going to destroy all of retail. No one could ever compete with them. They controlled the supply chain. They dictated prices to all their suppliers. 20 years ago, Microsoft needed to be broken up. They were going to control every piece of data in the world, right? You had to use them. You had to use their browser. They're the only software. Innovation, to some degree, challenged both of those premises. In the case of Walmart, no real regulatory step up. There was more of the threat in the case of Microsoft 25 years ago, but I don't remember any major decision by the Justice Department.
And that's the second part of this. What role does government play, right? And when do we start talking about anti-competitive practices? I read today a piece on Apple, where it at least looks like there could be some actions brought against Apple for anti-competitive behaviors in their App Store, right? And you can see that same thing emerging as it relates to Amazon. This is why Amazon just put a big part of their HQ2 investment, in the Beltway. And
Really?
I think they waited too long to do it, right? For the reason you're talking about, which is the backlash, the antitrust implications of getting too big, right? To where you can't compete and there aren't enough choices, and then prices start to go up.
Well, and it's always interesting to follow the money. We did a story this summer. They were not pleased about it, but it was all off data that the vast majority of CVS's money, you can say, hey, it was incumbency or whatever, but was going to Trump and Trump special funds and Republicans over Democrats in almost all the cases. Now, they were the party in place, et cetera, but also you like less regulation, especially when you're trying to do big deals. You don't necessarily, and you certainly don't want to piss off the people in power. Yeah. So, right now we have a Congress until January that is, laissez-faire at best when it comes to regulatory structures. I don't think a single new regulation has been implemented in the last 2 years. And obviously a president who is constantly talking about the need to deregulate in almost every structure within the government regulatory infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, I used to think there were clear lines, and and the political messaging, was clear. You knew where you was. I'm not so sure. It's pretty muddled. I don't think either party gets really great grades. Certainly not from me.
Yeah.
In terms of innovation policy, clear-headed strategies for how we continue to be a country that's about innovation, but recognize the implications for people and communities, and to mitigate against some of the fallout or the unintended consequences of what these innovations mean. But there's no question right now, a lot of these big tech players are feeling it. I'm sure in their boardrooms this week, where you could start to see the political backlash and the beginning mobilization of, I'm not sure exactly what we need to do, but we got to do something here. I know Facebook's more than a little worried about what's going to happen here. I saw today they got the coveted USA Today Turkey of the Year, Tech Turkey of the Year. So Facebook's got a lot of digging to do to get out from under some of the problems that they themselves created. By not paying enough attention to personal, trusted security of our own information and the way that those platforms are being used to drive behaviors for what most of us would say not socially right or good purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I also think it's a lot of sour grapes by a bunch of media companies who are getting pants. They didn't invest. They never innovated.
Some of it's that, but there's something
a
real
lot of it is that.
There's something real there, particularly in Facebook, right, which has become kind of easy, to bash these days.
That's right.
That is
it's the
true.
favorite son.
But that is true. But there's something there. They're not being bashed just because they're big. They're being bashed because most people sit there and say they had something to do and could have done more to not affect the outcome of the presidential election. And people are looking at that and they're worried about their data. They're worried about trusting their own information, who controls it, what's it being used for, and we're starting to really see what the consequences of the surveillance economy, where the way they make money is selling advertising, requiring them to get better and better about every single move we make and how to package and sell that to an advertiser. So I think you're going to see more backlash to it.
Biff, let's close with a little Biff. Actually, we'll talk a little Biff and then just close up with a little URI basketball. It's a big week for URI basketball. But Biff, what should we expect that's going to be new in 19?
Well, we are really, really busy as we turn the corner heading into next year. A lot of work in the healthcare space, right? This very ripe for disruption given how fragmented the experiences in our current healthcare system. And it goes back to this information and trusted information. More and more of us know that this information is ours, but we can't get at it, we can't use it, we can't act on it, and we're being asked to pay for more and more of our own healthcare. So a lot of the work we're doing right now is trying to, how do you do human-centered redesign of some of these health and well-being models, and how do we make sure that all the technology and all the new use of data and artificial intelligence is in service of us, our families, as opposed to through the lens of large institutions and players. Also doing a lot of work in education right now.
If you can fix both those, we'll be all the pleased for you.
Full employment.
Let's go to a program that's looking early, that it's got some troubles, and the Hurley era is over. URI is had disappointing, I would say at a minimum, beginning to the 2018-2019 season, after having, just a wonderful 2-year run under Coach Hurley, who's there longer, but the last 2 years were spectacular with NCAA bids and getting a win last year, losing to Duke, of course, but that's not. Everybody does that. Wednesday they play Brown University, a pretty good Brown team that's young and very, very athletic for an Ivy League school. And then they've got PC on Saturday.
Right.
Is this make or break week for URI basketball?
Have they used the word? I haven't seen it. Have you heard the words "building year" in any of the press here? I mean, we did have an exciting year last year. I mean, it was really good. I mean, we were worried there towards the end, and then they surprised us, and they went.
Cleaned everything up.
They did great. I think they're going to have a strong program, but I'm not so sure that they're going to repeat what they did last year, given the place. And
so your priorities are healthcare, education. Is URI rebuilding going to be item number 3?
I'm a huge fan. I'm an advocate. I'm a graduate, and so I want them to continue to build the program. But new coach, they lost almost their entire team because it was almost all seniors that we were going to, by and large. And so, I'm going to cut. Let's just say I'm personally going to cut them a little slack. A little bit of slack. I still hope they beat both Brown and PC, but we'll see.
I want to thank everybody for tuning in. These next few weeks, I think, are wild and woolly when we watch the numbers coming in from retail and some of the end of the year things. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to Business Monday. A great day, 5 wildly interesting guests. Thanks to Saul Kaplan from Business Innovation Factory for joining us today. We'll be back tomorrow. Kate Nagel will be hosting tomorrow afternoon. Lots of things going on. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks for joining us in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm Josh Fenton. Have a great night.